One is facing her.
Around this way.
Okay. Hello. Hello, and thank you for being here today. You are with Arlena Jones, and this is the Intervene Show. I have two wonderful and very special guests. Once again, I have my brother on the show, Leon. Hey, bro. And then we have Cerka, a second generation Holocaust survivor. Thank you so much, Cerka, for being here with us today. I'm going to let you further introduce yourself, further tell us about yourself, and educate us, and we'll kind of follow along. And I'll let Leon and myself um, learn in honor of you being here today and sharing your story with the community.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here. I often thought I would like to share some of who I am before I pass on to this world. And so it's a pleasure and honor to be here. Um, my parents were in the Holocaust, my mother and my father, and they lost their families in the Holocaust. Um, I was born in 1946 in Ansbach, Germany, which is a displaced persons camp. In a displaced persons camp, there were many around Germany that the Americans set up for those that were survivors of the Holocaust. So they could go there after the war and decide and recover and decide where they wanted to live. And they could help them find relatives and family that were lost if there were any alive. So my father and mother didn't know each other during the war, but they were sent to the same DP camp and met in that DP camp. It was called Felde Fink. And my father worked in a tailor shop, and my mother cleaned the tailor shop, and they met and they married. And then shortly after that, they were sent to Ansbach, which is near Nuremberg in Germany as well. And that's where I was born, in Ansbach, the DP camp there. With a very difficult birth for my mother. My mother um, really was malnutritioned after the war and had a lot of anxieties and stress. My father as well had depression. They both had depression because the atrocities they saw were just unbearable. So I had the cord wrapped around my neck. I was um, birthed by a midwife because they didn't have any people, any hospital in the DP camp. Um, I remember the DP camp even though I was very, very little. The DP camp was, it was a town, a German town where German citizens lived, and the German government asked, and the American government asked them to take in Holocaust survivors. And so it was a German town that was turned into a DP camp. And so we lived with a German family, and another Jewish survivor family lived with us in a very small, occupied space. And really, some of the German families weren't happy about taking in Jewish survivors. Um, and I remember my mom would put me in my buggy in winter, and there was a town square, and she'd wheel me down to the town square. It was really bumpy because it was cobblestone road. And we go to the town square where there were a lot of people milling around, many military, American military. And in the middle of the center of the town was a huge Christian church with a huge steeple. I remember that. And the GIs used to carry Hershey bars, and they would throw Hershey bars in my buggy. And my mom would gather them quickly, and she would go around the corner and exchange them in black market for some meat so we could eat some meat. We got ration cards, but it was very limited. And then, so I never really tasted chocolate when I was a child. So, but she, I remember her having to do that. Um, I was in the DP camp until I was 4, almost 5. And then my father made the organization HIAS came to the DP camp. HIAS is, I'm not sure what exactly what it stands for, organization that helps people immigrate to different countries if they want to. So my father thought maybe Argentina to begin with. And then he decided, well, first of all, our first choice was Israel, but we weren't able to go because Israel wasn't accepting immigrants at that time. And so then my father thought Argentina, but then he ended up saying America because it's a young country full of opportunity. So the highest found us a sponsor. My father wanted to go to a small town because he was raised in a very small town in Poland, very poor community, maybe 600 people, and 100 of them were Jewish. And they were hungry all the time. So he wanted to go to a small town in America. So Hayes found a sponsor, a synagogue here, um, who offered to sponsor us to come to America. So my father agreed, and so we went to New York. No, we didn't go to New York. I'm sorry. We boarded a boat in Germany called the General Moore. It was a retired army boat with hundreds of people. Very confusing times, most of which were Jewish, most of which were immigrating to the United States. And we boarded it. And the General Moore was small, and the boat was very, very crowded. And I remember that below deck were sleeping quarters, bunk beds, and there weren't enough bunk beds for everyone, so they had to sleep on the floor. And then the upper deck was the viewing deck. And then the above deck was where medical, where the doctor was.
So this was a passenger ship?
No, it was an army.
It's an army of, okay.
Yeah.
And what year are we talking about? Like about 1940,
This is 1950.
1950?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it took us 12 rough days. Everyone seasick, throwing up. But before we got on, actually, I remember experience. They loaded food on the boat, and we could only have kosher food, which is a type of food that is a pure food prepared in a certain way. No, um, it just so. Anyways, they brought on a lot of chickens because they were gonna have chicken, and found out it wasn't kosher chicken. So then they had to throw those chickens overboard. And I remember seeing the vultures diving down for these chickens. And so we didn't have enough to eat like we thought we would on the voyage, but we had food.
Were these live chickens or were they already?
No, they're dead chicken.
Okay. Okay, just had to be a little specific because,
Yeah, they were supposed to be kosher. Yeah,
okay.
kosher
Now, how
chicken.
did you know this one just said they were
Well, there's people that are um, the religious people on the boat are very strict about
okay.
the dietary of the
And before
boat.
we go any further, I had to ask Cerka a question. Could you explain what kosher means?
Well, it's a broadening term. Kosher means that, like, an animal is killed in a humane way. You don't keep hitting the animal. You only have one chance to kill that animal. That means that it's bled out, that there's no blood in the animal. It means no split hoofs in an animal. Like we don't eat pork, or goats, or can't think of other ones, but split hoofed animal.
Okay.
And we don't eat crayfish or cray animals that are scavengers.
Scavengers of
We
the
don't
sea.
eat
Okay.
scavengers. So, and it's prepared in a cleanly, certain way.
Okay.
And if you buy a bottle of olives that are kosher, they're usually very consistent, and they have anything you buy kosher doesn't have any animal products or oils or anything in it, basics, you know.
Okay.
And then kosher has a mark, there's several, it's called hechsher, and it's lots of times a circle and a U or a circle and a K. And those products are sometimes cost a little more, but are prepared and observed in their preparation more than average products are. That's kind of the basics of it.
Okay.
So in olden days, everyone ate kosher. So the religious people on the boat, which was probably half or more, had to have kosher. You know, we all ate kosher, and so they knew the chickens were not,
Okay.
and so they processed them over, threw them over. Um, so it was a very rocky voyage.
Sarah, and not to cut you off, I remember when we were introducing, you were going to mention your father and your mother's name.
Oh, my father's name was Moishe or Morris Kirsch, and my mother's name was Brunya or Bernice Kirsch.
And you have pictures to share with us, and I would like to mention as if you Google Morris Kirsch,
Yeah, my father is
if
oral history was given when he was 85 at the Holocaust Museum in Detroit. And it's also at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. So if you Google Morris Kirsch, Holocaust survivor, you will see the story. And if you also, there is the oral history and the written history as well. And then I wrote a lot of documentary things about my father's life as well. So,
okay. So just in case you guys forgotten, it's Morris Kirsch, oral history of basically just explain to it. Just look up Morris Kirsch on Google.
And you have pictures of the boat that you came here on. Would you like to share those as well?
yeah, but actually that was one of the boats that came across, but not the boat I came in.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you can share whichever you like.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have to find it.
Okay, go ahead.
Picture. Okay.
Just a minute. Okay. Actually,
Can, can we see it?
They can see.
Go. Can we see it? I mean, what is it? That's the boat that you said was on.
that's one of the boats, but not the boat that I came on.
Okay, this is okay. Just lean it. Which camera gonna show?
You can show it.
This one.
Yeah. Camera 3.
This. Who are any of these pictures?
They're
Thank you, Serica.
I'm not sure. Actually. To tell you the truth.
Okay, well,
And this was in, yeah. And this boat came in 1946, actually.
okay.
And I think these were actually maybe friends of my parents, perhaps,
Okay.
you know. But this boat came in 1946 because there was 46 of them, and it was so, yeah. Our boat, it was small as well, so I remember that. Overcrowded and
Were you frightened at all?
very,
Or were you?
very.
And we talk. How old are you? How old were you? We're talking.
I was 4.
4 years old.
Yeah,
And I have.
yeah, and very hard voyage.
Okay.
And um, I remember coming into the harbor of the United States, and we passed the Statue of Liberty.
Mhm.
We could almost touch it.
Ooh.
We, passed it to come into Ellis Island.
Now I remember you showing me some pictures when you were very young. I think which one did you show me? You and your mom, like when you guys kind of. I think you were overseas still.
Some of these pictures are in Germany, and some of them are here.
Okay.
But um, starting the coming into the harbor, the religious men pray 3 times a day and on the boat, and they go to the far end. They went to the far end of the boat to pray, but everyone started to pray and thank God that we made this 12-day
Wow.
rough voyage because people were throwing up, and it was just a very, very rough voyage. And so we came into New York Harbor and Ellis Island. Ellis Island was an island where immigrants were processed. And so we were processed on Ellis Island before coming into the United States.
I have a question. So you came here as refugees or as immigrants because of coming here from survivors of war, coming here as like a refugee versus like people when they're immigrants, they come here because it's their free will. They just were wanting to come for a better life.
Immigrants,
So you guys came here as immigrants, not as refugees. Okay, thank
because
you.
we could have stayed in Germany.
Okay, gotcha.
Cerka, you guys left which country to enter? I mean, which sea or body of water did you
That's a good question.
not body of water, but
I'm not
which country? I mean,
We came from Germany.
straight from Germany.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, from
I'm trying to see
Germany.
what body.
Um, So on Ellis Island, there were hundreds of doctors, really literally to process this boat. And we had to stand in line for hours. And my mother was holding my hand very tightly. I remember that. And she said, whatever they say yes. She said, and don't cough, don't sneeze, because if they suspect you're not well, you will have to go on a separate line and will have to be held. We won't be able to enter. And I was very, very nervous. And standing in line made me think of the lines we used to have to stand in to get a loaf of bread in the DP camps. We stood in line for a long time. And so we stood in line and had to wait to be processed. And when you get up there, when I got up there, it was like a conversion on your body, because they check your ears, your nose, your mouth, your hair, your body thoroughly, thoroughly. And there's all kinds of stations that you go to. And it was a scary kind of process. And at the end, if you're considered deemed healthy, we were vaccinated. And then we got off the boat and we went to Grand Central Station, waiting for a train to come to Kalamazoo. And I'll show you these pictures.
I'll help you hold it, Sarah. You can just explain it.
Okay. Well,
Lena, is it gonna pick up? Lena, can you see the pictures?
It's okay. The camera pick it up.
Okay.
this is in the way.
Nope, nope, nope. The camera behind you'll pick up.
Okay, I'm going to point out what they are. This is my mother, father, and I in the DP camp. And my mother had a little whisker, and I have one too, and I always held her with a whisker. This is my mother and I out in Ansbach. My father and I in Ansbach. My mother and I in Ansbach. This is me in the United States when I came, when I was a little older. And this is me when I first came. Okay. My parents and I in Germany. My mother at the age of 18, 21, and when she was in her 30s. And here are my parents from the concentration camp, here and here, after, immediately after. And then this is my parents when they first met. And my parents and I in the DP camp. So they're kind of a mixture of DP and here. So this is US, this is US, and the rest are Europe. And then, so, um, so we waited in the Grand Central Station, which was very, very, very crowded. And in this process, before I got on the boat, someone gave me a dolly. And my collection had dolly all in voyage. And when I went to Grand Central Station, we didn't know how to speak English. We had no relatives, no family here. And so I was very observant because as a child, I always wanted to, I was always very observant and I wanted to talk to people or want to know people and help people. And anyway, Grand Central Station was a combination of all kinds of things like people arguing, people kissing, people hugging, people fighting, just a whole combination of things. And I'm watching, and my parents they don't have much energy. My parents were pretty depressed and had post traumatic severely. And all of a sudden, someone ran by and grabbed my dolly. And I only had the leg. I hung, they had it so it gripped so hard that they yanked it out, but I had the leg of the dolly. And so I was confused why somebody would do that. And anyway, so I didn't have my dolly, just the leg.
Welcome to America.
So then the train came, and we had to get on a train to come to Kalamazoo, Michigan. And it was a long ride. And then when we got here, members of the synagogue here met us at the train. And actually, a Red Cross lady was there too, and she gave me another doll, actually. And it was different from my first doll. My first doll looked like me, dark haired, like a little immigrant girl. The new doll looked like an American doll because it had on a fur coat and a muff and fur muff and a fur hat and blonde hair and blue eyes and little socks and shoes.
Now we're not talking about a Barbie doll because
No.
this is way before Barbie doll was even invented. So
It was a rubber doll, and I was awed by this doll because I'd never seen anything like that.
Did you feel like the dolls? I'm sure you're more connected with your first doll.
I was.
How long did you have your first doll?
I had it. Somebody gave it to me, I think, when I was 2.
You have a picture of her by any chance?
No, I have a picture of the second Well, I
Well,
don't.
this is
Uh,
your or
I
this
have
is
a picture of my one
well,
dog.
show,
Um, these are more pictures of. Um, okay, this is when I came to America. This is when I came to America. This is when I came to America. This is when I was older. And here, um, this is Dolly here.
what did you name your doll?
I don't
What
remember.
about the first doll name?
I don't remember. I was so traumatized.
Oh,
I was just glad to have a dolly.
wow, that's sad.
Okay, and these are
With the birthday party here, what is this, Cerka?
and these are um, pictures of me in grade school. And um, school was difficult.
Now, Cerka, of all places to live, why did you guys chose Kalamazoo?
We didn't choose it because we didn't know anywhere. Hyatt chose it because it was sponsored here.
Hyatt.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and H-E-I-S. And Hyatt still helps immigration today.
Oh,
Um, so, so we came here and we um, we lived in a hotel downtown called the Columbia Hotel in 1950. We came in May 8th, 1950. And it was owned by a well-off Jewish man called Andy Levine, who had restaurants in town. Anyways, he owned this hotel, and we stayed there for a month or two. And then the synagogue found us a small one-bedroom apartment, and we moved there. And um, and then these are little pictures of when I during that time era. So this is me, older, like older, my dolly, one of my dollies. Me in the one bedroom apartment, my mother, and me at school. I had long braids down to my waist.
Hmm.
And me in the backyard of my house. And me and my mother and father in Millen Park. Um, I was not a, I tried to make the best of life because I was raised spiritually to turn the other cheek and try to make the best of things. But um, it was very difficult when we came here for me as a child because children didn't understand. No one understood us as Holocaust survivors. Um, there weren't any Holocaust survivors here. Um, and um, So it was most difficult. My parents had no language. I had no language. Um, we had no, we would walk a lot. My father walked a lot during the war, so we walked. Every day we walked to downtown Kalamazoo, which wasn't too far. And one day we passed the shop my father saw, and he looked in, and there was a man on a sewing machine, and my dad was a third generation tailor, and he was, wanted to go in, so we went in. And the man happened to be a shoe cobbler. It was right on Michigan Avenue downtown. And he understood Yiddish because at home we spoke Polish and German and Yiddish is a slang of Hebrew. And my parents were from Poland, so they spoke Polish. And I was from Germany. My first language was German. So he was so excited, my father, to talk to this shoe cobbler. And every day we'd go down there and sit, my mother and I and my dad, and just sit there all day long because we didn't know what to do with ourselves. And my dad would talk to the cobbler. And then my father met a man who had a dry cleaner store. And my dad, he said to my father that my father could have one little room next to the dry cleaners where he could repair clothes that people brought in. And my dad was excited about that. Prior to that, my dad had tried to get a job, but he did not understand the language enough to work for anyone. So he worked for Kalamazoo Pant Company, and he didn't understand what they wanted him to do. And so they didn't keep him. So he had to think about opening his own business. And so he started working tailoring next to Aristo Dry Cleaners. And it was on Water Street, on the corner of Water and Michigan Avenue. And then 2 years later, 19, I'm not sure what year, but my dad opened his own tailor shop. And it was called Morris's Tailor Shop, just one room tailor shop.
Was this on East Michigan? Because a lot of
It was on Water Street,
Water Street. Okay.
where, and across from it was a bar called the Rendezvous. Remember that bar? And my father didn't speak English very well, but he loved to play dominoes. That was his number one. He played dominoes since he was a child. And so he would get people to play dominoes with him in the shop. And pretty soon it was kind of a meeting place for people. And then my father got more business. He used to make men's suits and alterations for women. And then he also worked for the police department, putting on patches and altering uniforms there. But it was a very small shop, like his father's shop.
Did you work in the shop at all?
No.
No.
Mm-mm. My mother was very upset because she didn't think it should be such a place where people gathered. She wanted my dad to just have a tailor shop, and my dad said no. So they would talk about that, because, you know. But so um, my dad started, he had the shop for 25 years, you know, and loved to sew. Um, but my life was difficult in school, very, very difficult because children didn't understand. I was a big child and didn't know how to speak English. Wanted to be close to people always, but never was able to find out how. Um, I was very misinterpreted a lot as a child. I remember they were going to square dance, and I never saw square dancing before, and at school. And we were coupling up, and the young man that was supposed to be my partner, he didn't want to be my partner because he was smaller than me. And so I reached out to to say, come a little closer. I had my hand on his sleeve, and somehow I tore his pocket of his shirt. And the teacher was very upset with me. But it wasn't a hostile gesture, it was just a gesture of wanting to tell his partner it's okay. So I was misinterpreted a lot as a child, and the kids were really not nice to me. Like I remember in preschool, I was too old for preschool, but we went to preschool, and the kids all had mats they slept on, and I didn't have a mat. And the kids would laugh and laugh at me because I didn't have a mat. I thought, I don't understand.
Was the school that you went to, was it integrated at that time, or at that time there was no integration yet? So black children were not in these
No,
buildings.
not too many.
Mm.
Not hardly. I actually saw my first person of color in Bransonville Station when I was there.
Okay.
Yeah. There were some, in the school, but not so much in the classrooms that I was in. I don't remember. So we were, and then I had, I don't know if I have that picture, but I had one button different on my coat, and the kids used to make fun of me.
Of the button?
Yeah, you know,
That was bad upbringing. They had bad upbringing,
um,
That's ridiculous.
yeah, and point at it, and because I had immigrant, I call them immigrant clothes, I don't know.
Were there a big Jewish population back when you were?
There was,
Because you mentioned to me that you went to the same synagogue, right, for 75 years?
what,
The same synagogue
yeah.
for 75 years, right? So, I mean, you have to have,
Well,
and we're talking about,
yeah, but we were considered the immigrant family, so, um, we never had any close friends in the synagogue, really.
oh,
People were kind, and my father so appreciated them because they supported us for about a year, till my father was able to get on his feet
yeah.
and make a living. So there were Jewish people here, but
Yeah.
immigration wasn't really understood that much. I don't think at that point. Um, so school was hard. And with the first week, the first year I went, and in the first year I was in first grade, the kids took my shoes away from me. I remember that. And I had no idea why. And I came home without my shoes on. And I think it's because you take your shoes off for nap time, maybe. I'm not sure, but I don't remember the whole thing. But I do remember. And my mother had great confidence in this country, and my father too. So my mother always said to me, Cerka, what did you do? And I said, nothing. And because she didn't realize that um, things could transpire without you doing anything. And so kids used to pull my hair a lot because I had really long braids, um, and then the teacher ended up cutting off my braids in front of the class because there was an epidemic of lice in the school. And so she just cut my braids off. And that was very earth shattering for me. And I put them in a box and kept them for a lot of years. I remember that. But school was most difficult.
Now you mentioned, okay, what was your first exposure? I mean, you told me the story about you and your friend in the closet with the radio. Okay, that wasn't your first exposure to England, learning English, because a lot of people, immigrants, know English by listening to radio or some popular songs, easy lyrics,
No,
especially
I just learned it
just by
on my
on
own
your
at
own.
school. And my mother tried to learn English. She went to an English speaking class, but it was very difficult for her. English is very difficult. It's not a phonetic language.
Now, the boat that you came on, you said it was an army boat. There were English Americans in charge of that boat, right?
Yes, the military.
So, of course, he spoke English. Did you know any English? Did your dad or mom know any English
No,
at all?
most of the boat know no English. Is their language.
How did we just go?
No English when we came here. No English till I was older in school, and I got pushed right through school, which wasn't good because I didn't know how to read very well. I still don't know how to read as well as I like to. And so it was trying. Underneath it all had a lot of depression. My mother and father used to cry a lot at night, secretly,
Hmm.
and I could hear them um, when I was in my bed. And so I couldn't sleep at night, so I stayed up at night, and um, that was a difficult to realize. Um, but then I graduated from high school, and had various jobs.
What year did you graduate?
What
What year did you graduate from high school? What year did you graduate from high school?
was I what?
What year did you graduate from high school?
Well, I was institutionalized in my senior year for emotional issues. And so I would have, um, I think, graduated in 1962, but I graduated in 1964
Okay.
from Old Central High um, night school. Because after experiencing institutionalization, I tried to come back to school, but there was such stigma attached to it, I couldn't come back.
Mm.
So I had to go to night school to graduate from high school. And it took a period of time because that was a very traumatic era for me because institutions were very um, forgiving places to be.
Okay, on another note, Sarah, but you mentioned April is National Holocaust Recognition Month.
Yes.
Okay, did I say it right? First of all, say it for the rest of the people because I want to make sure we get the
Yes, in April, we usually remember the Holocaust. And throughout the United States and the world, they have Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Okay.
Um, I had the honor of going to two Holocaust um, conferences. The first one was in Washington, D.C., and I had never traveled before. And it was just huge and I was overwhelmed, but I wanted to sign this role that they had, registrar, to put my parents on that registrar. And they wouldn't go, it was too emotional. So that was the first one. It was very emotional, very, very emotional. And the second one was in Philadelphia here. And um, that was emotional as well, but I was more prepared for that one in Washington, D.C. So every year in my synagogue, we'll have a ceremony for the Holocaust coming up next week, I think. And in Israel, on that day, there's a certain um, sound of a siren that's blown, and everybody in the country usually stands still for 3 minutes, whatever they're doing. The buses stop, the taxis stop, everything stops, and they remember, the Holocaust because there are many Holocaust survivors in Israel. So, but I was privileged to go to Israel. Actually, that's one of my happy things in my life. I've had a hard time gaining happiness in my life. And so this is one of the happy times in my life that someone, and I to this day, I don't know who, sent me anonymous trip tickets to go to Israel. Um, and this was in the 80s. And I'd not been hardly in a car or a train or other than coming to this country because we did not have a car. And so it was just overwhelming that I'd be able to go to Israel. And people said, well, you don't know anyone. I didn't know anyone there. I didn't know what I was going to do there. I had no money. But the ticket cost 1,200, and if the person, if I didn't go, they would lose the ticket. And I tried to find out who it was, but I couldn't. No one would tell me.
Hmm.
So then I went, and I was just overwhelmed. It's a long plane ride, almost 20 hours of plane. And then I came into the terminal not knowing what I was going to do there. Or I didn't know anyone. And I stood there with all my baggage because I had to stay 4 months. And I just prayed. And there was the old lady that came up to me and started talking Yiddish. And she said, "What are you doing here?" And I told her. And she said, "Oh, She said, "Come to my house." So she had a lot of kids with her. She was a religious woman. And they all took my bags and I went to her house. And then she had a lot of family. And I went to all her family. In the 4 months I toured up and down Israel. And it was such a joyful, joyful time. And only through the grace of God did that happen, really. And I was just overwhelmed and I came back. And um, I
Do you have any
decided,
pictures where you were in Israel? And
I do, I decided to pay it back.
okay,
So I decided to go back and I went back in the late 80s and in 90, and I went back 3 times to work as a volunteer.
that's good, Cerka. Yeah.
And so I worked in hospitals, I worked in botanical gardens, I worked on army bases, and I worked the first time I went in a small veterans hospital. And then I worked in a mental hospital, which I wasn't sure why I was there because I thought it would bring me a lot of post traumatic stress disorder being there. But it turned out, and these are pictures of me in the hospital that I was working in. And I'm in white because I worked in the kitchen.
Okay.
And these are people that I worked with. Sandy worked inside with me, and Cheryl worked outside of the building and the flowers and the gardens. And this is me in the kitchen. With Sandy, we had to work with a lot of potatoes, so we would laugh every time we had to work with potatoes. The mental institution was a wonderful place. It wasn't like anything that I had experienced in this country. It was society there doesn't frown on or has stigmas on mental health, disability, any disorders a human being has, I would say in general. And so the hospital was not a depressing place. And the administrator had an open door policy. You could just go in and talk to her at any time. And she said, "You can go anywhere you want in the institution. Here you have a lot of red tape involved." And so I went all over and did much in the institution. One day I was walking down a trail and I heard this song this lady was singing that my mother sang, and I was overwhelmed. And I went up to her and she spoke Yiddish. And I said, "Where did you hear that song?" And she said, "I was in a concentration camp." And she was in the same concentration camp my mom was in.
Oh.
And I was overwhelmed and I said, "Probably God sent me here because there are survivors of the Holocaust." So,
What was the
that
song? You remember the song?
I don't. It's a Yiddish song,
Okay, so
a very old Yiddish song. But so I worked all over, and I was at that time I had been a massage therapist and was learning acupuncture, so I could use that there in the hospital. I worked in the kitchen. I worked with patients a lot, feeding the elderly and taking them for walks and doing a lot of massage therapy and acupuncture there. And then I was allowed to go into seclusion cells too, to talk to people. And I was overwhelmed by that visit. It was just such a fruitful visit. Um, and each time I went, I worked in a different area, whether it was botanical gardens or hospitals or in army bases.
Are you still in contact with the people from Israel?
I am,
That's
yes.
good.
And so these are some of the happy. When I traveled, I met Bedouins, and Bedouins were people that lived in the deserts in tents. And they made some of these Bedouins made these elaborate dresses and headwear. And
Oh, wow.
and so I was with a person that I met, and we came across this Bedouin tent, and he said, Cerka, try on one of those Bedouin dresses. And I said, okay, so here I am in the tent with the Bedouin dresses and the headgear.
Ah, okay. Lena, did you see it?
She showed it to me before we came on camera. You can show my camera if it's on still behind you.
Oh, yeah. So still, just for double.
Okay, go ahead, Serica.
This is
I'm listening.
okay.
And then every um, the marketplaces are very busy in Jerusalem and all over Israel. And this is a Thursday on Thursday evening at the marketplace in Jerusalem because Jewish people celebrate Friday night to all of Saturday. So they do all of their shopping Thursday and Friday during the day and start cooking early because religious people don't cook during the time of their holiday, the Sabbath. So I was sent to the market to get things, and it was really hard to shop there. Um,
Did you do some cooking there also, or?
I did, yeah.
Okay. I'm about to show off some of them dishes. Gonna have to have a.
And this is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a holy, the capital of Israel, a very holy city. And the history of civilization is all throughout Jerusalem, all through Israel, but especially Jerusalem. There are areas where they have excavated where you can look down in a certain area that can actually show you one civilization from another and artifacts where they have brought that up. This is the Rock of the Dome. And the Rock of the Dome used to be a big synagogue. And then it was taken over by the war and it became a mosque. And it's very, very ornate. And at the time I was there, Jews were not allowed to visit that mosque. And right below the mosque, you can't see it, it's down in here, is the Wailing Wall. The Wailing Wall is the only wall that stood after the temple in Israel was destroyed. And it was destroyed twice, and that temple wall stood both times.
Hmm.
And so people go to the Wailing Wall to pray. And
I was gonna ask that. Is that the wall you're talking
this
about?
is the Arab section of the wall. This wall goes quite a long distance. And so this is the Arab sector of the wall, which is on the Arab side, and I'm putting a prayer in the wall because in the wall there are thousands of prayers that people have put in the wall. And um, and actually, first time I went, I prayed there and I put a prayer in the wall. And the second time I came back, I'm praying at the wall, and there's a piece of paper that falls out of the wall into my prayer book. And there are papers on the ground as well that fell out of the wall because the wall is so full of prayers. And I look at it, and I was going to just put it back in the wall, but it was my handwriting.
Hmm.
It was the prayer that I had put in the wall a year before, and it said, God help me come back to this holy land of Israel. I was shocked.
Oh, that's amazing.
Many miracles, many miracles in
Yeah.
Israel, many, many, many. So we would go there and pray right before Sabbath, and he would put prayers in the wall. And I stayed with many, many families I didn't know in Israel, big families, religious families, and um, who were very kind and giving, and um, lived in many places. I lived in kibbutzes, which is the community setting. I lived in Moshav, which is smaller community setting, and in homes, and it very, very happy times. And I went there approximately maybe 5 times, 4 or 5 times. Um, and one time there was a wedding, a special wedding that was going to happen there. People were from actually the United States.
Hmm.
And I said, I can't go because I don't have the money to go. The other trips were sponsored volunteering. So the people that I had met in Israel decided I should go to that wedding. So they collected money and sent it to me so I could get a ticket to go to that wedding in Israel. I was just overwhelmed with emotion that people would care that much about me. And I did go to that wedding and I did stay, and, and it was a very holy time, really very holy and special time of my life. You would people in Israel when I was there, they were always wanting to know how you are. Strangers come up on you on the street, say, "How are you doing today?" And I say, "Do I know you?" And they said, "No, but how are you doing?" I was very, very impressed by that. So, yeah. So those were happy times, and I was very happy to experience that. It made up for a lot of the things that were difficult in my life. I think life balances out.
Exactly.
And I wrote a lot of poetry and I wrote a lot since I was a little girl about my experiences in the United States because I didn't have communication skills and close friends. So I like to look back at my writings, and we're all big survivors. God makes us big survivors, and I am a big survivor, just like my parents were survivors of the war. I'm very, very, very thankful. You know, Life can get difficult, but I really believe that God makes it balance out for us.
As we're getting ready to wrap up the show, what is it that you would like to say to the world? What is it that you would like to express? What was your philosophies?
I would like you to love me when I'm living and not when I'm dead and not when the grass is growing over my head. That's one thing. I would like to encourage us to be broadening in our perspectives. I've always been very broadening in my perspective, and I've been so enriched by it. Um, and I'd like our society to be more broadening in their perspective. And also, no matter how bad it gets, to always remember to count your blessings. Because many times it was difficult for me to remember to do that. And then I had a reminder, an angel would come from nowhere, a stranger, and just remind me of my blessings. And so we need to really think about our lives and
Mhm.
what we've been given, even though we may be living hard lives, that we also, there's a blessing involved in everything we do, in every breath that we take.
Mhm.
And I so appreciate being able to share some of who I am because I don't think too many people know
I wish we
enough.
had enough time. I thought he said we gotta get ready to go.
Yes, an hour. We've been
Not even getting
we've been enjoying. You know, is that what they say? Time flies when you're having fun. You
And I
know.
hope I wasn't all over the place. I hope it makes
No, go ahead. And Leon, is there any last? You
well,
know.
since we're wrapping up, I think
Yeah,
we go
yeah.
into these.
Well, sorry you can't teach your 8 hour course in.
We're gonna have
But
to do this again,
we're gonna have
Sarah.
to do this
Because
again.
I have to
Yeah.
mention too, Cerka probably survived two of the most significant events ever in human history. Okay, I don't know. We already talked about the the concentration camp, but Cerka also attended Woodstock. So
one day, one day.
well, still, that's still significant event that probably never ever both events never ever going to happen again. I know that. Oshwash, they never going to happen again. In Woodstock, probably never ever going to happen again. But Serica was fortunate enough and blessed enough to, well, the Woodstock. That was something very. We have to have another show about that. Okay, so this is just a precursor of our continuation of the adventures of Miss Serica. So therefore, just
I want to encourage people to journal and write poetry if they
yeah.
can, and because it's an easy way to look at things and share. You know, too. If you can remember, you can look at your poetry and your writing.
Exactly. And not just journal people, just like write random notes down, like you heard a good joke or you heard a recipe for, because my memory, I can tell you right now, my memory is not sharp like it used to be. I have to write down everything, even have to write down, I'm gonna have to write the show down because I'm not forget about what's this certain thing I write every day, whether it be a quote, a cliche, or a recipe, or like I said, a joke, or how to fix tool, anything. Everything is being written down and documented. So therefore, um, but anyways, I would just like to just say thank you, Sarah. We wrapping up now?
We are, and I was going to ask Erica to mention her parents' name
Yeah,
and
let's do that
information
again.
one more time, so that if anyone wants to learn more about your father and mother and their story and their biography and autobiography, they can get that information. They might be a third grader who needs to do a story, and here's a.
Or a senior in college, they need to do a
Well, I would
thesis.
very much like Holocaust studies to be looked at more closely in schools, um, or Kalamazoo to have a Holocaust remembrance
Oh, that would be
as
cool,
well,
sir.
Yeah, my father's name is Morris Kirsch, and my mother's name was Bernice Kirsch. My mother didn't really talk that much about her experience. My father, my father became
Thank
a
you.
citizen, U.S. citizen when he was 85. He gave his oral history at 85, and he voted at 85.
So it's never too late. And thank you for being here and sharing your story. Thank
My
you,
pleasure,
Leon,
my
for
honor. Thank you so
And
much.
the journey continues.
introducing Serica to me and to the world. And God bless you. Thank you so much for being here today. And I hope everybody who's been able to watch the show today learned something. I've learned some information. I have a lot of questions, but I get to ask you outside of the show. Everybody else is tough noodles for them unless they can catch you at one of your phenomenal events, or at your synagogue, or however they're gonna have to find you. I get firsthand connections with you. I get to see you tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So I'm thankful. Thank you again, Leon, for
Thank
bringing
you.
and introducing me to Serica.
I hope it makes
It does. Yeah, yeah. Like I said, it's a learning experience. It's a learning experience.
It's good to learn everything. Learn something new every day. And plant trees, by the way. Anyway.
A perspective. God bless you, and thank you all so much for being taking your time to watch the show, and I hope you got something out of it. Until next time.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Thank you.
Sarah, I was going to ask you, man, where's your parents from? Because I got the map of Poland right here.
Well, you won't find it on a map because it doesn't exist anymore.
Well, this is an old book first.
It's Rashchaba, Poland.
Will